Welcome, bienvenue, welcome to another live stream. IPSA kind of magic in celebration of the independent personal search agents up and down the country, all part of the IPSA, which is an association at the moment chaired by Hamish McClay of Search Convey. And we often discuss everything to do with the reasons why IPSA are such a great organization to be involved with if you require searches done. And a lot of this is down to fellowship, down to internal support, down to relationship building. However, today's topic is something else. Council mistakes, registry blunders. Good Lord. Would you help me make sense of it, Hamish?
Well, it's something which does come up from time to time. However, I feel important to remind people of it because, like anything else, if we are aware of the possibilities of something happening, we're better prepared for the situation arising. And one would hope that as time progresses, that with everybody screaming how vital it is that we all use as much possible data as we can grab hold of, it's best to just remind people, yes, it's all very well grabbing hold of the data, but how accurate is the data of which you're grabbing hold of?
Absolutely important. I mean, we all know the old adage, rubbish in, rubbish out. And the trouble is, if you've got rubbish data in, you're not going to make the right decisions based on it.
We are very fortunate in much of the work that we do that IPSA as an organization, although we are a collective, we're a cooperative, we're a team of people who work together to be able to provide information throughout England and Wales between us all. And as a consequence, we have the relationship with the local councils. And I think more important, because we have the experience between us of working with those councils, we will know the type of area that it happens to be. So, for example, if something should come up and suggest that this particular property was in a flood risk area, now that could cause enormous consequences if we happen to send that wrong information back to somebody. And there's several things that could happen, of course. That sale could fall through.
Right.
Certainly what would happen, the time it took to get the sale together, if it was going to go through, would be extended, because it would have to be, this flood risk area, we need to investigate this. What are the consequences? Can I get this insured? Blah, 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 all the rest of it. Now, unfortunately, much of the information that we get from different agencies is actually unrefined. No more so, funnily enough, than the environmental information. We need to be very careful about that. But if you're working with the right company, that could be okay there. But largely, what we're speaking about is, if you like, the local authority information that we get directly. Or one of the unfortunate things is now, or it depends how you look at it, the information that we get relative to land charges, which is specifically about certain properties, does actually come from Her Majesty, His Majesty's, God, one forgets this, His Majesty's. There's been Her Majesty's for such a long time that
I know.
We've been operating sort of 20 years. For 18 of them, it was sort of Her Majesty's. Now, of course, it's His Majesty's Land Registry. And it doesn't seem to make any difference. We still seem to have the same challenges, although some would argue aspects are improving. But we had an interesting one, which sort of came up, which, as a consequence of much of what's happening, Land Registry had a very challenging task on their hands. They had to collate information, and are still working on it because they're only a third of the way through, information from over 300 councils to try and actually sort of get that information together, bearing in mind that with 300 councils, there had to be at least 150 different ways of doing it. I'm being generous. I think somebody was the other day there with when they're divided by 2. But so let's say there's only 150 different ways of that information having been held in the first place.
Right.
The most peculiar sort of types of things, some of it handwritten, some of it typed, and some of it certainly in no way that could be just, it had to be retyped to actually get into the records again. So there's all sorts of ways this can go wrong. And we know it as search agents ourselves, because we collate the information and we take the information from the council. We will transcribe it much of the time because we refine that information, and then we'll double check it before we actually send it off. But we also know what errors there can actually sort of be within it. Do we always get 100% right? That can't be guaranteed. Not in this particular type of industry, because humans are involved, but they need to be involved as well, because AI cannot tell whether 3 to 6 is wrong or 36 is wrong. We could be right. Now, AI can't read it very. One of the most recent ones that we had. Now, this is upgraded information. Land Registry received the information. Council upgraded it and send it back again. And now what's quite interesting, I don't quite understand this because people keep their records different ways. The way the council maintain their records, for whatever reason, this particular sort of land charge, which is called an Article 4. Now, an Article 4 is something specific, and it can be about keeping chickens, which we, for some strange reason, we always had this challenge with High Wycombe. When we first started, every single time you did carried out a search in High Wycombe, you were told you weren't permitted to keep chickens. I don't know if there's overkeeping of chickens in High Wycombe for whatever reason. But anyway,
they obviously like their chickens there.
But it's an Article 4, and it also can be about sort of maybe keeping caravans in your garden for 48 years. I don't know. There's all sorts of different things that can come up with Article 4s. And what it's used for most significantly presently is what we call the HMOs, the houses of multiple occupation. Because most cities now, whereas previously it was possible just to sort of take a house. We've got a couple of changes in law, actually. We need to put this right. Initially, there was basically people could actually, if they chose to, convert their house into a house of multiple occupation and then draft it through to the council after and say, okay, chaps, we've just done this. Is that all right? And it would be passed and nobody would worry about it. Now, of course, the trouble is, as the demand for housing has increased significantly, particularly with sort of social housing, but housing generally, the demand for houses of multiple occupation is increased as well.
Yes,
so,
and I don't see it decreasing anytime soon either.
Well, as we will know, it's and one of our colleagues that joins us will be joining us tomorrow, and we will actually be speaking about social housing a little bit more tomorrow, strangely, because it's not a topic that comes up terribly often. However, it is something which is vitally important to our community, when I say community, I mean the whole community throughout England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland, because we, as we well know, we're desperately short of accommodation. So the only way to actually break through that is to build more flats. We do know there are worries with flats, but we also need to have a lot more access available to houses of multiple occupation. Right. And there's good and bad. Of course, we can lose a larger house that would accommodate a larger family. However, if you're going to permit 3 to 4 different units to live there, that's a positive gain, because otherwise these people might have nowhere to live. So houses of multiple occupation, and throughout so many places, I mean, we're based fairly local to Oxford. Throughout the whole of Oxfordshire, throughout the whole of Oxford, not just specific regions, this aspect of houses of multiple occupation comes up. You have to have planning permission to do it. You will not get retrograde planning permission, and the chances are, if you tried it, people would be very anti and unlikely to do it. Now, what happened, and one of the Midland councils, they decided that they would amend their records as far as land registry were concerned. The records they already had, which were perfectly adequate, but they upgraded them. Now, quite why they need to mention the same thing twice, I don't know. So you have your document, like you do, Why you say exactly the same thing there and say it there again, one never knows. There's good reason for it. Councils like to do this, and red tape type people like doing it. You may as well put it down twice. Although instead of saying as above, it's sort of or ditto or something of that ilk. They repeat it. It could well be that AI doesn't like it if you don't do it the ones now. AI aside of things, because this could have been all of a sudden we get the upgrade instead of between 3 and 6 people living in a property. Unfortunately, the amended record showed 36. The little dash was missing between the middle. And as we know about life, our life is but a dash. There is one date, there's a dash, and there's another
date. And of course, a computer won't necessarily realise that that's nonsensical.
Absolutely not. Why should they worry about 36 people living in a house of multiple occupation?
Gosh.
Reason at all why they should worry. Now, the strange thing is, this didn't, just because of this new document which they'd raised, it didn't happen once, it happened twice, because it happened at the top and it happened in the middle of the form. So, attention was drawn to the various bodies. You can't tell Land Registry that because Land Registry are relying on information to come from the council. So, you can't, as I said, so information has gone through. Land Registry get told. We've got a good working relationship with Land Registry. Land Registry get told. The council get told, obviously, as well as they change it. Now, here's a challenge. That error was in 2 different places.
I can already see where the mess is going.
So, on the one hand, it is relative to 3 to 6 people.
Right.
But further down the page, it becomes 36. Now, who on earth checks that? Now, one worries, and I think this is, we've spoken about this before, because there's certainly some fraudulent things that go on, or they're suggested as being fraudulent, because if somebody in another country can just sign bits of paperwork to say something's okay when it's never been checked, I guess it has to be admitted to be fraud. Ultimately, there'll be a good excuse for it, and somebody will find a good reason for being able to actually sit there and do it. However, it is an important aspect that if it's not checked, it will automatically come out. AI can't check it. So if there's somebody sat at a desk and they don't know the council area, now it's fortunate that it was an IPSA member that spotted the error in the first place, because outside of IPSA, very few people put in these changes. We don't hear any feedback from Land Registry to say anybody else is making any comment. Although they're, in fairness, I ought to say COPSO, one of our sort of more commercial orientated organisations, which looks after sort of some people who carry out property searches. They do have one of their team working on it, but they don't appear to have had any. That doesn't appear to have got. So what we're trying to say, of course, there are going to be errors which come through. If you have somebody that's familiar with the council area, they will notice it, and they will get it changed. And of course, one assumes it doesn't necessarily happen. But let me just sort of run. So smoke control orders getting wrong. Planning approval dates, misses listed buildings, expired entries not removed, blanket information about listed buildings covering the whole of the council area. They can't all be listed buildings. The type of agreements notices aren't stated, incorrect article 4 mapping, mislisted building, incorrect mapping of section 106 ban. I'll stop there.
Yeah, the list goes on, huh?
Now these are all. Now we were hoping to have a few of the people who actually sort of keep control of this. Heather would normally have been with us, our executive officer, because she's the one that collates all of this information. But what we will do a little bit further on down the road, when she's actually sort of free, we'll get her back on, and we can identify areas that we should advise that continue to happen, because it is important people are aware of these. And one of the advantages is it won't matter whether the council itself has become a unitary authority, because many councils are becoming unitary authorities now for economic reasons. First of all, the government don't want to take responsibility for the whole lot any longer. They feel it's much more cost effective that instead of having 3 councils, you push it into one. You can get rid of a lot of the team, and of course you do lose. We've said this before. You will actually lose those experienced people from certain council areas.
Yeah.
The majority of those ones I just read out to you were from those areas that have become unitary authorities where there are errors. Now, somebody in Leeds doesn't necessarily knows what goes on in North Yorkshire any more than they know sort of some of the other, because North Yorkshire itself was a number of different councils. When they're all combined together, it does make it awkward. We didn't even get into the south of the country there, but the point of the matter is errors are going to occur.
I think we get the general idea, and it just as I said at the beginning, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you don't keep on top of, in this case, double entry here, whereby one gets fixed and the other side doesn't, so you end up with just confusion waiting to happen. Thank you so much, Hamish, for helping us put this on today. And to those of you watching, one of the great things about IPSA members, there are many, but one of them is the fact that they develop local relationships. So that means they can probably spot these things in a way that perhaps people who are trying to do a search from a distance, as it were, won't necessarily know about, won't necessarily recognize, and won't necessarily take the information as with the appropriate pinch of salt. But I believe, Hamish, this is all going to improve over time.
It will improve. It's bound to. However, it's while it's getting there which the problems are being caused. And of course, whilst we respect the fact that there are errors, it makes it all the important that these are identified and checked and feedback is given. So all of you IPSA members out there, if you are finding recurring mistakes as a consequence of the council shift, whether it be because they become a unitary authority, whether the land registry, do please let Heather know, because that's absolutely sort of vital of what's going on. And getting contact actually through IPSA, whichever way. You'll have your contact details for Heather. I mean, it is important. So do let us know of any that we haven't spotted yet, and you haven't reported to Heather yet, because we can get them remedied and they won't keep coming up. And yes, whilst we will be helping everybody, even the sort of the corporate providers.
Yes, you're paying it forward in many ways. What you're by doing this this bit of work of identifying stuff and then notifying Heather so that we can get it corrected. You're actually doing a service to the whole community as well. So I think it's a very helpful task. Thank you once again, Hamish. And to all the guys watching, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. We'll catch the moon on the way, and hopefully you can look after your mental health. Until next week, bye-bye now.